In today's spooky video, we're going to be continuing our looks at the brand new Playmates Toys Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is the Ninja Ghostbusters, Leonardo as Stantz. Before we have a look at the figure, let's get some dimensions going. Leonardo as Stantz is about 6.5 inches tall. Of course, his ecto goggles, try not to knock the figure down, brings him to about a little closer to 7 inches tall. And to show you how he stacks up next to the figure that we already looked at, Michelangelo as Peter Venkman, there's the two figures side by side. Now, Ray Stantz, or Leonardo Stantz, is a little taller because of his hair, and of course he's got the ecto goggles on. But roughly they are the same, they're making use of the same body mold. So there's not really much different between the Venkman and the Stantz. Although, again, they are a little taller. Let me just pick up Leonardo here. They are a little taller, and I say a little, I mean they are considerably taller than, say, for example, a regular Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Here's Leonardo. I mean, a better comparison versus when I was using, Leonardo for Michelangelo's comparison. But here's regular Leo, and then here's Leo as Ray Stantz. You can see that there's a considerable height difference between the two. Also, to bring in a couple of other turtle figures that we looked at during Halloween, there is the Mummy Leo, and there is Monster Hunter Leo, also from the Mutants and Monsters line. Again, these guys, these three here, are all scaled appropriately. Ray Stantz is towering over all three of them. Now, I wish that they were smaller. I wish that Ray Stantz, Leonardo Stantz, was a little shorter. Shorter to fit, of course, the heights of all the other three turtles, or all the other turtles that you may have in your collection. I'm not really sure why they opted to go with a larger format figure, but it is throwing me off. Of course, if you want to have these guys on display, Leonardo is going to be a considerable amount taller than all your other turtles in collection. Now, heights aside, Leonardo does come with a fair share of accessories. A lot of these accessories may look very familiar to you because they are the same ones that Michelangelo came included with, one of which being the proton pack and proton wand. It attaches right there. There's a little clip that attaches either to this side or a little bit of a smaller clip right underneath there, and it just attaches like so. You can go either or. I think specifically it's intended to be on this side. But what's neat though, and I mentioned this with the Michelangelo, is there's a little wheel that rotates the proton wand stream. Reminds me very much of my childhood and the old Kenner Real Ghostbusters line, so I think that's really cool. And much like the Michelangelo, attaching or putting on the proton pack is pretty much the exact same thing. I'll become myself quite the pro by the time we get to ourselves the last figure in this lineup. And then, of course, there's 4 figures. Just going to kind of fit that over to place. Yeah, the line actually will consist of the 4 Turtle brothers in their respected Ghostbusters character. I personally think as well they could have saw an opportunity to do a April O'Neil, for example, and release her like a Dana Barrett. That would have been also quite cool. But it just attaches to the back, and you've got the little harness, little clips here on the front of the harness. Again, you can either clip it into the back, or you can try your best to pry, and there's no give at all in these fingers. The fingers are dense. It's probably some of the densest plastic I've seen on figures. And then you've got this very broad handle. It is extremely, almost impossible to get it through his hand. If not for the fact that it had the little cord attached to the bottom portion of the handle, you may be able to see if we can actually... I would suggest you may have to heat the plastic in the hands just enough to pry the fingers. If not, you'll have to kind of feed the cord through and then try your best to kind of wedge it in between the hand. It is, it's hard for me to express in words how difficult it is to get it into his hand. The handle is just way too big. So I will probably say I'll have to heat that up just to get the fingers pliable enough to spread them a little bit, and then I can get the proton wand in place. Just clip that into place. By the way, also his other accessories are very familiar sights so far, because we've seen this also with Michelangelo's. It comes with the the ghost trap, and it's the exact same. If you don't believe me, it's the same ghost trap. There it is right there. The same ghost trap that we also got with the Peter Venkman or Michelangelo Venkman. Another returning visitor to this party, you get a PKE meter. Same PKE meter as what we got with the Peter Venkman. No paint or anything like that, but I will say it's still pretty nicely sculpted. This right here is the thickness of the handle that should have been on the proton wand. It shouldn't have been any thicker than this, because these fit perfectly into his hand. Slides very easily on the one hand, and on the other hand, I should make a t-shirt that says that, on the other hand. On the other hand, you can easily fit the proton, there I go saying it again, the ghost trap into his other hand. And it fits fine. I don't know why the proton wand handle had to be as thick as it was, because it really is next to, no, I'm going to say it is impossible to get into his hand unless you pry the fingers. As for his ghost, let me just get him to stand here for a second. Leonardo Stantz comes included with the library ghost. A little smaller, of course, but comes with the library ghost, which is one difference between that and what came with Michelangelo, because Michelangelo came with the kind of piranha dead fish ghost. I don't know if that's it's not the actual term for it, but that's what I'm going with. Now this one has a stand. It stands perfectly fine. The library ghost has these little flat edges on the bottom area of the skirt, which allows it to stand perfectly fine as well. It is translucent plastic. Woo! It's translucent plastic. And I have to say the sculpt is actually pretty good for the fact it's a little smaller. I think it still gets the point across. It looks pretty cool. Okay, so we'll put those all to the side, and let's have a look at Leonardo Stantz. Now his little name patch will say Leo versus Ray. And I was trying to think to myself, Michelangelo, as discussed in the previous video, Michelangelo, based on the Nick cartoon, is a better fit for Peter Venkman. If we were looking at classic cartoons, I think Raphael would have made a better Peter Venkman because of his sarcastic nature. Raphael, I think, makes more sense. Well, he is Winston Zeddemore in this particular line, and they opted to make Leo, Ray Stantz here. About the only given is that we made Donatello Egon. I mean, that makes obviously perfect sense. Scientist, yeah, that makes obviously perfect sense. But I don't know where I would have put Leo. I guess Leo does make a logical sense as perhaps the Ray of the group. You know, I guess that, yeah, I guess that does make some sense. From a Ray Stantz Leonardo amalgamation, it does look good, I have to admit. I like the face sculpt. They have eyebrows, which is a little jarring. Hair sculpt's good. And actually, I like the fact that they also incorporate the ecto goggles, which it seems like a lot of Ray figures, I was going to say Egon figures, Ray figures seem to have always the ecto goggles out of all the other three Ghostbusters. This guy's a little Ghostbuster patch on the one side. And pretty much it is the exact same body. There's nothing different between this, well, let me bring it in again, between this and the Michelangelo. There's nothing really different. The costume colors are also the same. Of course, the skin color varies, as it has with all the other turtles over the course of time. Michelangelo's a little lighter in color. Leonardo a little more of a lime color. And all the colors of the swappable areas, such as the elbow pads and the bandana, have been switched, of course, appropriately in blue, closer then to, Leonardo. What's neat as well is that they've also colored the proton stream the same color as the bandana. Well, not quite the same color, but you get what I'm saying. The orange to match the orange in Michelangelo, the blue to match the blue in Leonardo. Articulation on these guys would be the same on all of them because they're using the same body mold. So you got your ball joint in the head, universal joints on the arms, yeah, universal joint also in the forearm, a bend in the elbow, and a rotation in the hand. The legs, unfortunately, do use an older articulation hinge, so it's got that little hinge here. As I mentioned before, with the hinge this way, you can't pull the leg out this way. You have to kind of rotate the leg this way to allow the leg to go out, and vice versa. And then as well, you've got the little hinge in the knee, and then the lower leg also rotates. No peg holes on the undersides of their feet. I didn't really spend a lot of time talking about this, but I really like the feet. Just by its sheer size, it reminds me of the green boots from Super Mario 3. It's got some stitching there and some laces. Very nicely sculpted. The Ninja Ghostbusters Ray Stantz, portrayed by Leonardo, is another good outing by Playmates. I'm still baffled by why the sizing has to be as big as they were, and as you probably can see here in the final looks, still can't get the proton wand actually into his hand. So I will advise, if you get a chance to pick these up, and I do recommend picking them up because they are really cool, you may have to heat not only Leonardo's hands, but the other three turtle brothers in order to get the proton wands into their hand properly. If not, you'll have to do what I'm doing right now and totally cheating. Just shy of the fact that the handles on the proton wands are way too big, and that the sizing on these turtles could have been a little bit more closer to scale than with the other turtle figures that we have in our collection. I really like the amalgamation, the combination of two properties that I've always really liked as a kid. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and, of course, Ghostbusters. And I think the two work very well together. It would be interesting to see if they ever branch out and maybe give us a second wave, as maybe they could do something utilizing the bad guys, the Shredders, the Rocksteady, the Bebops, and all the other characters and such. We could have also maybe gotten ourselves, as mentioned, a April O'Neil, maybe as Dana Barrett, which would have also been a very interesting aspect. But needless to say, as the four brothers on their own, as the respected members of the Ghostbusters team, I really do like these figures. There's a little thing, there's a couple, I say a couple, it boils down to two things that throw me off on this particular line. Again, the sizing of the proton wand handles and the sizing of the figures as a whole. If you can overlook those two aspects and you're only displaying these guys on their own and not displaying them next to the other turtle figures, I think this is a home run hit by Playmates Toys. Today's spookerific review, we're continuing our looks at the Playmates Toys Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This was the Ninja Ghostbusters Leonardo as Stantz. If you guys haven't had a chance yet to subscribe to this channel, make sure you hit that little subscribe button down below. You'll never miss a beat when it comes to future videos. And of course, speaking of future videos, there's going to be a whole ton of future videos lined up. Not only spooky related, but of course regular videos as well. As always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do. I'll see you next time.